as we start this Lenten season, it really is, an interesting reality for us. It's one of the days that I still can't quite figure out what is it in us that brings us to Ash Wednesday. That there are holy days of obligation. There are days like August 15th that you're supposed to go to church. And I can't get people to go to church. But by golly, people call, when's Ash Wednesday? When's Ash Wednesday? And they all want to make sure they get to Ash Wednesday. I can still remember being at SDSU and one of the football players, Father, when's Ash Wednesday? And I'm like, well, how about you come on Sunday first? And then we can talk. But there's something about it. We also know that our Protestant brothers and sisters have realized it, and so they're picking up on it. They also realize that there's something about this day. There's something about the ashes that were put on your forehead that speaks to something deeper than just, I went to church. And so we begin this, and the church reminds us, and many of you probably heard those words, remember you are dust, and to dust you shall return. Now, I don't know about you, but you say that enough times, you just sort of, you just say it. And yet, I found myself thinking about the fact that 3 months ago, you heard from Mark Shalanta. And Monday, his family laid him to rest. That this reality that for Mark, he understood that his life would come to an end. And he knew that it was coming quicker than most of us would think about. And yet here we stand. As we start our Lenten journey, we're reminded that 3 months ago, a man stood before you and shared what Christ had done. I also know that last week, my brother, Father John, laid to rest an 11-year-old boy. Again, this reminder that life is precious and the amount of time we have is not ours to determine, but has been given to us by God. In both cases, we would say life is too short. And yet, in the midst of that, we would say with both of them, they lived their life to the fullest. And so at the heart of Lent is this stark reminder that we are dust, and to dust we shall return. And when we think about that, it's not in a morbid sense, but it's in a way in which it helps us to clarify and helps us to look at things in a new way. That it is this reminder for us that we want to say, what is most important? What is the thing that I should be most focused on and pay attention to? How many times have you found one of your children wanting you to play with them, read with them, do something with them, and you've had something to do? Business, phone calls, work, and you found yourself just saying later, later, later. That when we stop to think, maybe this is the moment I've been given, we begin to look and say, is it really important right now? Or is what more important is to spend time with my child? How many of you have bickered with your spouse about something that you know is really trivial, but you just want to be right? Or maybe you are right, and you want to just be right again. Again, if this was to be the last conversation you would have, would we change the conversation? In the midst of it all, we begin to discover that Lent is this opportunity for us to truly acknowledge the reality of our mortality. And acknowledging it, allowing it to be the thing that helps us to live differently the circumstances of our life. Whether you're going to be given a long life or a short life, what's most important is how you live it to what you've been given. And I think this is one of the things that's important for us. Do we really ask for the presence of God to be present to me in my current circumstances? And so whether it's an important business decision, whether it's simply the day's activities, do we really seek to be able to say, Lord, where are you in this? Where are you moving? Where are you acting? What is it that you might be asking of me in this moment? And yet we know that as men, this is difficult because we like to be in charge. You guys are all businessmen, so you all know how this works. You work hard, you have a plan, you're dedicated, and you make things happen. And yet, at the same time, you have to ask yourself, for what reason? What is the point of all of this? What is the point of working to build a business if in turn I don't understand the grace that God has given me? And so the church for these 40 days will say we should pray, fast, and give alms. It is a way in which we can prune both our mind, body, and soul. It's a time for us to take an honest look, though, as well, and to be able to say, what area of life have I not really handed over? And I think this can be the challenge, because sometimes, and I know I'm just as guilty of this, I can look at my spiritual life just as I look at my physical life. Or maybe you look at your spiritual life like you look at your business life. And you're like, okay, if we want a better fourth quarter, what do we need to do? And so if I want a better spiritual life, what do I need to do? And you sit down and you make these plans and you look at things. You talk maybe to your priest or to someone that you really see as a holy person. And you start putting together the game plan. All right, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to Mass once a week, or I'm going to pray, or I'm going to read the Bible, all of these things. And in a sense, it's sort of like what we do for New Year's resolution. And we could ask the question, how are they going? And I don't know about you, but I don't even remember mine. And so there is this challenge, because we can hit Lent and we can have these goals. And we're like, for 40 days, this is what I'm going to do. For 40 days, this is what I'm going to do. And we treat it, in a sense, like a New Year's resolution for Christians. And instead, what we really want to be able to do is to say, Lord, what is it that you want for these 40 days? What is it that you're really asking of me? And one of the things that you're going to discover, if you're like me, is he's going to ask the impossible. And you're going to know it. And he's going to say, I want you to do this. And you're like, no, God, that's not, I can't do that. I can't, that's way more. And he's like, exactly. I'm not asking you to do this. I'm asking you to let me give you the grace that it would be done. And it is a mindset that changes the way we live. This idea of understanding the power of grace. That grace does for us what we cannot do for ourselves. That you ask any person who's in recovery, and they will tell you it is only by grace. They can tell you all of the ways in which they tried, all of the ways in which they changed this and changed that, moved here, moved there, all kinds of things they tried. Because they knew that there was a part of their life that was out of control. And all of them will tell you it was the moment in which they admitted they weren't in control. But there was someone else who could do for them what they could not do for themselves. And so too for us, this real reality of Lent is that opportunity for us to really look at our life and to say, what part of it is the Lord wanting to do for us what we cannot do for ourselves? One of the things that I say often to people when I talk about my own vocation story is one of the reasons that I hesitated to become a priest is precisely for what I'm doing right now. That if you would have seen me in high school, I would not have ever been sort of front and center. I went to Capers last night. There is no way you would get me on a stage. There's no way you'd get me to sing. There's no way you'd get me to dance. Partially because I can't do them, but because I have no desire. Put me behind the scenes, put me in the background, I'm all for it. And so I can remember saying to the Lord, how is this going to work? I've watched priests, and they're in front of people, they're talking, they sing sometimes. Lord, none of this is going to work. And so it can't be. And yet, I had to be able to look at that and say, well, maybe it isn't about me. And maybe what the Lord desires to do has to be something that every time I say, it isn't me. That I actually worry that if I would have been good at public speaking and loving to be in front of people, that it would have been detrimental to my priesthood. Because I would have been convinced that, well, of course everyone wants to come to St. Mary's because I'm at St. Mary's and I know how to put together the best liturgy ever. And I know priests who are incredibly talented. And I do think that it's a challenge. Is it God working, or is it just me with all of my gifts and talents? And so I had to be able to say, Lord, if you want me to be a priest, you're going to have to figure out this small component of the priesthood. Like, how am I going to stand in front of people day after day after day? And I can remember when I was ordained a priest, I was in the sanctuary and it was perfectly fine and I was all at peace, and I had to go down to get the gifts. And so I remember stepping down, and I stepped off of the last step, and I looked out and I was like, oh my gosh, there's a lot of people here. And I stepped back up, total peace. Total peace. So then I realized, like, what? So I stepped back down, and I was like, And I'm like, so for months, I would stand on the last step because I didn't want to go down to that other step because it was scary down there. And I remember talking to my spiritual director, I'm like, am I crazy? Like, I'm telling you, it's tangible. And he's like, you're not crazy, you're not integrated. How do you take the priesthood that you know so well when you're in the sanctuary out of the sanctuary? So too in your own life. What is that area of your life that you're not comfortable? The area of your life that when you have to step into it, you're like, or we're going to step back over here. I'm comfortable right here in my life, and I'm going to stay there because I know who I am, I know what I'm about, and it's easy. And my spiritual director said, you're going to have to step down. Because at some point you have to figure out, who are you when the church isn't telling you who you are? So maybe for some of you, you know exactly who you are when you're sitting in your office. You know exactly who you are. And it is easy to sit there. But you go home, and it ain't so easy. The questions, the decisions, the time. And you find yourself not as comfortable there. Or maybe it's at church. And you go to church and you're like, this is, I don't want to talk about my faith. I don't want it, like, none of this. But this real ability. And so over time, and it's still a work in progress, I do always have to ask this question, who am I? And to know that it is God's grace that helps me to do the things that I need to do. And so for you as well, what part of your life do you need God's grace to help you step into it? And of course, I get to step back into the sanctuary, and I get to go where I'm comfortable as well. And so it's not a matter of the church just saying you always have to be uncomfortable. But the church saying, look for where you're uncomfortable. And then seek the grace you need to be able to do that. One of the other realities that the church tells us is when we begin Lent, you really should pick things that you can't do. And this is always, not always, but it's often a surprise to people. Because I don't know how your Lenten thing goes, but I've got about 5 that I rotate, right? You're like, okay, these are the kind of the things I do. Well, what did I do last year? Okay, I gave up sweets. Okay, well, I won't do that this year. And you kind of rotate through. What's the thing that you just aren't going to be able to do? What is the thing? Now, I always have to caveat this with, it shouldn't cause pain for everyone else, though. So if your Lenten journey is causing pain to the family, then you're going to need to adjust it. But again, what is it? What is it, the thing that I just am like, and the church says, pick that. Not because the church just simply wants us to fail at our Lenten resolution, but because the church really wants to put us in a place where we see our need for grace and then to experience it. I can still remember as a priest, one year I gave up TV because I thought, well, it won't be too hard. I really don't even watch a lot of it. And I wasn't really thinking it through. And I didn't really think the fact that Lent was in March. And there's certain activities that we watch on TV in March. And the Jackrabbits were actually doing well in basketball. So I was okay with the Summit League because I got tickets to go. So it was in person. So I didn't have to watch them on TV. But then when they went off to the big dance, they went off and I'm like, now what do I do? I'm like, well, streaming isn't really TV. Because it was new, right? It was new. It was different. It was a whole different way. So I watched one game on the internet. I'm like, well, that wasn't TV. That was different. And then I realized that the only way I was going to be able to watch it is on TV. And I was like, I'm like, but this is like historical. And so I called my friend and I'm like, you're watching it, aren't you? And he's like, yeah, come on over. I'm like, well, I'm supposed to give it up for Lent. And he's like, oh, man. So I show up and I knock on the door, and as a good friend, he had on EWTN and Mother Angelica praying the rosary. So I informed him he could turn the channel back, and the whole time I'm like, I can't believe I'm doing this. Like, it's a basketball game. But I'm like, but it's the Jackrabbit. And then my mom called. And I look at my phone and I'm like, no. So I stepped out of the room to answer the call because I knew I needed to answer it. And she was like, oh, Paul, honey, I know you gave up TV for Lent. And so I've been watching the basketball game for you. And I just wanted to give you some updates. And I'm like, oh, thanks, Mom. I hung up the phone and I went back to watching it. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, what in the world? And yet, as I reflected back and had to talk to my spiritual director about the problem I had with all of it, I could see like God giving me all of these things. Like all through the whole thing. He's like, you really don't have to do this. You don't have to do this. Like there is an alternative. But I kept looking within and saying, well, but I. And instead of being able to look at the Lord and say, you will provide for me. And it wasn't just that the Jackrabbits ended up losing, that I knew that it was the wrong decision. It was the fact that I kept looking within to say, do I have what it takes? And beginning to look and say, how can I make this work for me in this circumstance? Because when I made this plan, I wasn't thinking about this plan over there. And so it has been for me this real reality that when I look at these 40 days of Lent, it isn't just an opportunity to be able to figure out, can I go 40 days? Can I make it 40 days without this or that? But to really see the 40 days as where is the Lord wanting to continue to do more for me? Where is the Lord trying to really set me free from the areas of my life that I think I need to be in control, or the areas of my life that I think that I need to be the one that makes it all happen? And it is one of those things for us that we begin to discover that it's often in those moments of failure that real spiritual growth takes place. And maybe many of you experienced the same thing in your own life. That moment in which you failed. The moment in which the business deal that you had put together didn't work out the way you thought. The moment in which maybe even your whole company went under. The moment in which you couldn't make what you wanted happen. It is in those moments that we really have the opportunity to really look within and to say, what can I learn from this? And many people will say, it was in that moment that I failed that I really learned. Learned, one, to not fear failure. Right? How many of us are so afraid of looking like a failure that will never reveal anything to anyone that shows weakness? The church, in a sense, invites us all to be able to admit that we're all failures in one way, shape, or form. You know, I don't have my ashes yet. I'll go get them here at noon. But you'll walk around town, you know, and people will look at you, and some will understand, some won't. Some will tell you you got something on your forehead. Or maybe some of you will wipe them off. I don't know. But ultimately, what the church is trying to say is each and every one of us is in the same place. Each and every one of us is here to start Lent with a real reminder of our mortality and our need for grace. And when we can continue to do this, and when we can continue to look at this, we look at everything in a different way. That it is an amazing thing that we see with the Lord. He knew the ways in which his disciples would fail him. He even told Peter. He's like, here's how it's going to happen. Like, you're going to deny me. No. One of you is going to betray me. No. And yet when we look at those two circumstances, we see two incredibly different outcomes. Judas unwilling to acknowledge his own failure and bring it to the Lord, continued to look deep within himself. And when we just look within ourselves, it's a dark, dark place. And thus Judas couldn't handle it. Peter had the same reality. He looked within himself and he saw that place that he didn't think he would ever go. And yet he found himself. And yet, at the same time, he found Christ. And I've often wondered what that must have looked like. As Jesus is on the beach, the fire's not an accident. Peter, aware of his sinfulness, just sitting there waiting, like, when is he going to tell me? Told you so. Peter, do you remember a couple days ago, Peter? When we were in that upper room and you were confident? Do you remember that? Do you remember where I was a couple days ago too, Peter? Hanging on a tree, looking around for my friends. None of you there? No, Jesus says none of that. Now, Peter inside is running through all of those scenarios, right? We've all run through those, right? We've all done the thing we knew we shouldn't do, and then you're face to face with your spouse, face to face with your boss, face to face with a customer, and you're trying to figure out, how do I spin this thing? How do I make this look like it's not my fault? What do I do? And the Lord is there saying, be honest. Be honest. It didn't go well. But what's the most important question? Again, to be able to look through all of it and to be able to say, what really is most important? And we know, Jesus just says, do you love me? Do you love your spouse? Do you love your children? Do you love your family? Yes, Lord, you know I do. Okay. Then reorient things. Look at things in a different way. But it was because Peter was willing to look at Jesus and willing to admit what he had done, that he was truly set free. And I'm sure from that moment on, Peter had an incredible freedom because he realized that the Lord was never going to give up on him. I mean, he had done really everything you could imagine had done to get Jesus to leave. And in that freedom, he was able to find himself again. Able to step out in confidence, able to step out in a way that allowed him to be able to be wrong again. And we know it's going to happen, right? Him and Paul, butting heads. Like, who's right? Circumcised or uncircumcised? Well, Peter has to defer to Paul. And he does. And he's humble about it. And yet confident. Because Peter knows that it isn't always about him. He knows that when Christ is at work, sometimes we get it wrong. But if we're men of prayer and men who are willing to really be humbled before the Lord, we discover that the Lord will work through us in particular ways. And this is really what it means to be a Christian. It is this ability to be able to discover Christ in the midst of our life in such a way that it changes everything. And it's one of the quotes that I use a lot, and it comes from Pope Benedict. He said, being Christian is not the result of an ethical choice or a lofty idea, but the encounter with an event, a person, which gives life a new horizon and a decisive direction. That what the church is offering to all of us today is to really take a look at our life and to say, is my being a Christian more of an ethical choice or some lofty idea about what I'm going to do? Or is it the encounter with an event, a person that changes my life? Because the reality is we have to encounter Christ every day. And we have to pray for that grace to allow that encounter to continue to deepen within each and every one of us. And I know even for myself, as a priest, it can be easy to be able to just sort of go through the motions and do the things that a priest is supposed to do. It can probably be the same thing for you as businessmen, to be able to just go through the motions. This is what I do, this is how it works. But this real ability to be able to step back and to see these 40 days as an opportunity to really say, I want to encounter Christ in a new way. I want to encounter Christ in a new way in my business, in my family, in my social life, but most importantly in my spiritual life. I want to encounter Christ in such a way that he continues to draw me deeper into this mystery. That it is one of those things you'll discover then as you experience this power, as you experience God's grace working, and you begin to realize how it works in you and for you, that you're willing to let go of things that you didn't think you could ever let go, and you're willing to be able to take on things that you didn't think you'd ever take on. That it still does amaze me that I stand before you as a priest. It's one of those things that you just are like, I'm still not sure how I got here. Kevin Miles was my vocation director. He's probably thinking, we're still wondering how you got here too. Because we know our humanity. We know it well. And yet we know that there's a call. And the call that I have for the priesthood may be different than the call that you have. But you're all called. You're all called to that deeper relationship. And the church wants to say to us, this is what Lent is about. Letting that call deepen this time in a way maybe that it hasn't before. That the ashes that are placed on our forehead are a reminder for all of us that our lives will come to an end here on earth. And yet we are called to an awareness of Christ's presence in the midst of our current circumstances, so that one day we can all find ourselves in the glory of heaven, knowing that the gift that we've been given is eternal life. As you look around this room and you see men of all kinds, you see men on a journey in various ways, it is a reminder for us that it's never meant to be alone. That it is a journey that we take together. And this is why the fraternity is so important. Because if we're honest, we as men can often have areas of our life that we live alone. Areas of our life that we just haven't been willing to open up and to invite somebody in. The person that we need to invite first into every area of our life is Christ. And then to trust that he will place in your life others. He will place others in your life who can help you on that journey. Because again, one of the things that we discover is when we can see that someone else knows what I'm feeling or thinking or experiencing, it sets me free. It sets me free from that danger of thinking I'm the only one and I have to figure it out. But instead, it's another that I can look at and can ask the question, how did you make it happen? And if they're men of faith, men who understand the power of grace, they will tell you that they didn't make it happen. They allowed it to happen within them. That this is the gift of Christianity. And so today we pray for that grace. The grace of a greater awareness of the area of our life that needs God's grace. The greater awareness of the circumstances that we are living. But most importantly, the greater awareness of Christ in our midst. Amen.